Earth's deep space monitoring station buzzed with activity. On a normal day, the crew would be analyzing asteroid movements or tracking satellites. But today, something different had come through their receivers, a distress signal from deep space. The signal was faint, filled with static, and the language was completely alien. The station's AI worked overtime to translate it, producing only fragmented phrases: help, attacked, critical failure, and then silence. Earth's Space Force Command quickly picked up on the anomaly. This wasn't just any random signal. It came from the HFY, a mysterious alien race known for their strength and advanced ships. Though not openly hostile, the HFY rarely interacted with humans. Their ships were legends, powerful, unstoppable. Yet now, one of those ships was calling for help. Commander Jack Carter, Earth's top fighter pilot, was summoned for an emergency briefing. Jack had spent most of his career defending human colonies and had faced his fair share of dangerous missions. But when his commanding officer explained the source of the signal, even Jack raised an eyebrow. "The HFY. Are you sure?" he asked, arms crossed over his flight suit. "Their kind never asks for help." "That's what makes this unique, Carter," the officer said. "Whatever hit them must be big." The signal came from near an asteroid cluster just outside our territory. Normally, protocol would be to leave them alone. But this might be an opportunity. Their ship could be in critical condition. If we help, it could improve relations. Besides, you've faced the toughest scenarios before. You're the best pilot for this. Jack scanned the brief on the screen. No life signs detected. Power systems failing. Possible hull breaches. The images of the battered ship were sobering. He knew he would be flying into a potentially hostile environment. Still, he couldn't shake a feeling of curiosity. "All right," he said after a moment. "I'll check it out." Minutes later, Jack was suited up and boarding his sleek fighter craft, the Valkyrie. As he prepped for launch, he double-checked his systems. Engines, green. Shields, green. Weapons, green. This wasn't just a rescue. It might turn into a fight. The countdown began. Jack gripped the controls as the hangar bay doors opened. Outside, the endless expanse of space waited. The signal coordinates were locked in, the engines roared, and the Valkyrie shot forward. As he accelerated toward the distress signal's origin, he wondered what he'd find. An ambush, a deadly trap, or maybe, just maybe, a chance to save lives. Whatever was waiting out there, Jack Carter was ready to face it. Jack's fighter shot through the vast emptiness of space, stars flickering faintly in the distance. The distress signal's coordinates were locked into his navigation system, growing clearer as he neared. His instruments began to pick up debris, small pieces of metal drifting aimlessly. Soon, the source of the signal came into view. A massive alien warship, its once sleek hull now riddled with holes and scorched marks. It was drifting without power, its lights flickering on and off. Jack's first thought was how something so formidable could be reduced to such a helpless state. He circled the ship cautiously, scanning for threats. His onboard AI reported multiple breaches, life support systems failing, and a faint energy reading from what might have been a backup generator. Jack switched on his comms, broadcasting on the same frequency as the distress call. "This is Commander Jack Carter, Earth Space Force. I'm here to assist. Respond if you can hear me." Static. Then a faint, garbled voice. "Help. Reactor unstable. Life support failing." It was a female voice, strained and weak. Jack frowned, checking his oxygen reserves. He knew entering a damaged alien ship could be risky, but leaving them to die wasn't an option. With a deep breath, he aligned the Valkyrie with one of the larger breaches and prepared to board. His ship's systems created a pressurized seal against the alien hull, allowing him to step into the wreckage without his suit depressurizing. As soon as he entered, the extent of the damage was clear. Walls were charred, flickering lights created eerie shadows, and the air was thin and cold. "Hello, I'm here to help," Jack called out. His voice echoed through the empty corridor. No response. He checked his scanner again, picking up faint life signs ahead. He quickened his pace, his boots clanking against the alien metal floor. In the next room, he found them. A small group of Sci-Fi crew members huddled against a wall, their breathing shallow. Their commander, a tall woman with dark, reflective eyes and faint scars across her face, looked up at him. She held her weapon tightly, even in her weakened state. "You're human," she rasped, glaring. "Yes, I received your distress call," Jack said, lowering his hand slightly to show he wasn't a threat. "Your ship is falling apart. I'm here to help you get out alive." Her eyes narrowed, but the exhaustion on her face was clear. She finally lowered her weapon. "Our reactor will fail soon. We need to leave. Now." Jack nodded. "All right. Follow me. My ship's docked nearby." He helped them stand, supporting one crew member who could barely walk. As they moved back toward the Valkyrie, the walls around them groaned under the stress of the failing reactor. Time was running out. Jack knew they had only minutes to escape before the entire vessel went up in flames. Jack Carter led the group of alien survivors through the damaged corridors of the ship, every step accompanied by the distant rumble of their failing reactor. The Exalvire commander, Riza walked behind him, still clutching her weapon as if expecting another attack. Jack's instincts told him she didn't fully trust him yet, but there wasn't time to argue. "Move faster," he said, keeping his tone firm but calm. "Your reactor's going critical. If we don't get out in the next few minutes, none of us are making it out." One of the Zalvire crew, younger and weaker, stumbled and fell to one knee. Jack immediately turned back to help. He knelt beside the alien, noting their unique, silvery skin and glowing veins. The young alien's breathing was shallow, and Jack could see the fear in their dark eyes. "We leave no one behind," he said, gently pulling them up. "Riza, give me a hand here." Riza hesitated for a moment, then moved to support her crew member. Together, they helped the injured alien continue down the corridor. Jack could feel the vibrations through his boots. The ship's structure was reaching its limit. When they reached the sealed hatch connecting to Jack's fighter, the air was hot and thin, and the groaning metal made it clear they had mere seconds. Jack slapped a control panel on his wrist, activating the docked Valkyrie systems. The fighter's hatch slid open, revealing the safe, pressurized interior. "Inside. Now," Jack shouted. Riza motioned for her crew to move first. The group scrambled into the Valkyrie's rear cabin, collapsing into the limited seats available. Jack helped the injured alien through and turned to see Riza lingering at the hatch. She looked back at her dying ship, her jaw tight. "Riza, there's no time," Jack barked. "Get in." Finally, she stepped inside, and Jack sealed the hatch. A second later, a warning blared from the Valkyrie's control panel. The alien reactor was seconds away from overload. Without hesitation, Jack jumped into the pilot's seat and hit the throttle. The Valkyrie's engines roared as it launched away from the doomed vessel. Through the viewport, Jack could see the alien warship behind them, the once proud craft now a glowing husk. Moments later, it exploded in a massive shockwave, throwing bright light and debris into space. Jack steadied the ship, adjusting the shields to absorb the wave's force. When it was over, he turned to see Riza standing behind him. She stared at the wreckage, her eyes glimmering with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "You just lost your ship," Jack said, his voice softer now. "But you saved your crew. That's what matters." Riza didn't respond immediately. After a long moment, she simply nodded. "Thank you, human." Jack leaned back in his seat, releasing a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. It wasn't over yet, but they were alive. For now, the Valkyrie's cabin was silent except for the faint hum of its engines. The Exalvire crew sat huddled in the back, their exhaustion evident. Riza leaned against the bulkhead, her arms crossed, watching Jack. He didn't have to look up to know she was still suspicious of him. "What now?" she finally asked, breaking the tense silence. "First, I need to find out what hit your ship," Jack said without turning around. His hands moved swiftly across the control panel, running scans on the surrounding area. "If we're flying into more trouble, I'd rather not be surprised." The Valkyrie's sensors picked up faint traces of ion trails leading away from the explosion site. Whatever had attacked the Sci-Fi warship had moved on, but not too far. Jack studied the data. The trails were scattered, almost as if the attackers hadn't expected anyone to survive and were retreating without caution. "Looks like a raiding party," he muttered. "Small, fast ships, hit and run tactics." Riza stepped forward, her voice sharp. They weren't just raiders. They knew exactly where to strike. Our reactor, our life support, everything vital was targeted within minutes. This wasn't a random attack. Jack glanced over his shoulder. "So you think it was deliberate?" Riza nodded. "Someone wanted us destroyed, and they wanted it to look like an accident." Her jaw tightened. "I have enemies back home. It wouldn't surprise me if—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. Jack raised an eyebrow, but decided not to press. He could tell she wasn't ready to share the whole story. Instead, he focused on the task at hand. "We don't have the firepower to chase them down," Jack said. "And you don't exactly have a fleet waiting for you. If you want answers, we need a safe place to regroup and figure out our next move." Riza hesitated, then nodded. "There's a neutral station nearby. It's not Sci-Fi territory, but it's safe enough for us to dock and resupply." Jack pulled up the station's coordinates. It was in a quiet sector, well off the main trade routes. "That'll work. But if they're tracking you, we'll need to be careful. This ship's fast, but it's not invisible." "Just get us there," Riza said, her tone sharp. Jack entered the coordinates and pushed the engines to full power. The Valkyrie leaped forward, the stars streaking by as it headed for the neutral station. Jack knew that this was only a temporary safe haven. The attackers were still out there, and he had a feeling they wouldn't give up so easily. For now, though, he focused on keeping the crew alive. If Riza was right, and someone had set her up, then their problems were just beginning. But Jack Carter wasn't one to run from a fight. Not when lives were at stake. Jack Carter guided the Valkyrie into the neutral station's docking bay. The enormous structure hung in the void like a hollowed-out asteroid, its surface bristling with antennas, shield arrays, and landing platforms. This was no bustling hub. It was a quiet, isolated outpost where travelers could lay low, repair their ships, and avoid trouble. At least, that's what Jack hoped. The docking process was smooth, and soon the ship's engines powered down. Jack rose from his seat and turned to face the Sci-Fi crew. Riza was standing by the hatch, her arms crossed and her face unreadable. "We'll need to split up once inside," she said, her tone clipped. "Resupply quietly, keep a low profile. If the wrong people find out we're here—" "Understood," Jack interrupted. "I'll handle the fuel and some basic repairs. You and your crew can gather supplies. But keep it quick, we shouldn't stay here long." Riza gave a curt nod and gestured for her crew to follow. The Sci-Fi survivors moved in silence, clearly still recovering from their ordeal. Jack watched them leave before stepping out himself, keeping his hand close to his sidearm. Neutral stations were supposed to be safe, but Jack had learned long ago never to let his guard down. Inside the station, dim lighting and narrow corridors created an atmosphere of unease. Vendors sat behind reinforced stalls, offering everything from spare parts to questionable refreshments. Jack purchased the supplies he needed, making small talk with a gruff human mechanic to avoid drawing too much attention. He had just secured the fuel shipment when his comms device buzzed. "Carter," Riza's voice came through, low and tense. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Jack asked, his gut tightening. "There's someone here, someone who shouldn't be," she said, One of the station's vendors just tipped me off. A Salvire operative. If they see us, we're done. Jack frowned. What's an operative doing on a backwater station like this? I don't know, Ryza admitted. But if they're here, they're looking for us. My crew's hidden for now, but we can't stay much longer. Jack quickly paid for the fuel and started back toward the dock. His mind raced. If this operative was part of the group that sabotaged Ryza's ship, then their escape hadn't gone unnoticed. The attackers knew Ryza and her crew had survived, and they were trying to finish the job. Ryza's voice came back through the comm. I don't trust this place. We need to leave. Now. Jack reached the Valkyrie and began prepping the ship for launch. As he did, Ryza and her crew appeared, moving swiftly and quietly. Jack could see the tension in their movements, the way Ryza kept one hand near her weapon. Let's not stick around for trouble, Jack said. If someone's after you, we can't afford to stay here. Ryza nodded grimly. Agreed. Let's go. The hatch closed, the engines roared back to life, and the Valkyrie lifted off. But as Jack plotted their next course, he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The Valkyrie accelerated away from the neutral station, its engines burning hot as Jack pushed the throttle to the limit. The Excelvire crew sat in tense silence, their eyes darting between the ship's displays and the void outside. Ryza remained close to Jack's side, her hands gripping the back of his seat. Whoever's after us, they won't stop, she said. You saw the operative back there. They were waiting for us. Jack didn't respond right away. Instead, he kept his focus on the navigation console, scanning for any sign of pursuit. They needed to get to open space where he could use the Valkyrie's speed to their advantage. However, the faint ping on his sensors told him it wouldn't be that simple. There's a ship trailing us, Jack said flatly. Fast one, too. Ryza's brow furrowed. They must have had a scout near the station. Once we launched, it was only a matter of time before they locked onto us. Jack nodded. He knew a chase when he saw one, and this was no ordinary pursuit. The enemy ship, smaller, faster, and built for quick strikes, was closing the distance. His displays lit up with proximity warnings, and the crew's faces grew pale. Jack's hands moved quickly, rerouting power to the shields and plotting an evasive course. Hold on, he said. This is going to get bumpy. The Valkyrie banked sharply to the left, then plunged into a nearby asteroid field. Jack counted on the dense cluster of space rocks to give him cover. The Excelvire crew shifted uneasily, gripping their seats as the ship weaved between chunks of spinning debris. A few smaller asteroids grazed the shields, making the ship tremble, but Jack's steady hands kept them from crashing. Do you have a plan? Ryza asked, her voice tight. Yeah, Jack said. Don't get caught. The enemy ship followed, its weapons firing quick bursts that narrowly missed the Valkyrie's hull. Jack's fingers danced over the controls as he rolled and pitched the ship, dodging the blasts. Each movement was calculated, the result of years of combat experience. The Excelvire crew, used to their own advanced technology, couldn't help but glance at Jack with newfound respect. They're gaining on us, Ryza warned. Not for long, Jack said. He spotted a dense cluster of asteroids ahead, each spinning rapidly on its axis. With a flick of the controls, he guided the Valkyrie into the thickest part of the field. The enemy ship hesitated, clearly wary of the hazardous terrain. For a few precious seconds, the distance grew. Jack took the opportunity to power up the Valkyrie's afterburners. A burst of energy sent the ship rocketing forward, leaving the enemy far behind. Once they cleared the asteroid field, Jack turned to Ryza. Whoever they are, they'll be back, he said. We need to figure out who's behind this and why they want you dead. Ryza met his gaze, her jaw set. Then we'd better prepare for what's coming next. After narrowly escaping their pursuers, the Valkyrie drifted in the shadow of a nearby moon, using its rocky mass as cover. Jack powered down the main engines to mask their signal, leaving only minimal life support and sensor systems running. The HFY crew was quiet, their faces still pale from the chase, but their attention turned to Riza as she stood in the center of the cabin. "I know you have questions," Riza began, her voice steady but tired. "And you deserve answers." Jack leaned against the control panel, his arms crossed. "Let's start with why someone is willing to risk a full-scale chase just to kill you and your crew." Riza nodded. "Our mission wasn't just a routine patrol. We were sent to retrieve a package, something critical to my people's security. But we never made it to the rendezvous point. Someone leaked our location, and we were ambushed." Jack frowned. "So you were carrying something valuable. What happened to it?" Riza hesitated, glancing at her remaining crew. "The package was destroyed in the attack, or so we think. We lost all contact with our cargo ship before we could confirm. My enemies believe I still have it." Jack's eyes narrowed. "So this isn't just about taking out a few soldiers. They think you have something that can turn the tide in a larger conflict." Riza's jaw tightened. "Exactly. That's why the attacks won't stop. If they can't capture the package, they'll destroy anyone they think knows about it." Jack exhaled slowly, trying to process the new information. He glanced at his console, where his sensors showed no immediate threats. For now, they were safe, but he knew it wouldn't last. "All right," he said finally. "If they're after you because of this package, we need to give them a reason to stop chasing us." Riza raised an eyebrow. "You have a plan." "Not yet," Jack admitted. "But if we can figure out who's pulling the strings, who ordered the ambush and sent that scout, maybe we can turn the tables." The HFY crew exchanged uncertain glances. One of them, a younger soldier with a long scar across his cheek, spoke up. "Commander Varric, if the package really is gone, we have nothing to trade or negotiate with." "We don't need to trade," Jack said, cutting in. "We need information. Whoever ambushed you didn't just stumble across you in deep space. They had inside knowledge. Someone betrayed you." Riza's expression darkened. There were whispers of a mole within the fleet, but no proof. "If that's true." "It's true," Jack said firmly. "And if we find out who it is, we might be able to force them to call off their hounds." Riza considered this. After a long pause, she nodded. "Then we find the mole, and we end this." Jack straightened up, his mind already racing through possibilities. "Then let's get to work." Jack sat at the Valkyrie's console, tapping commands into the screen as he tried to narrow down the source of the ambush. His onboard AI was running through the ship's records and comparing them to the limited data Riza had shared. Meanwhile, Riza and her crew huddled in the back, speaking in low tones. Their exhaustion was evident, but the tension kept them alert. After several minutes, Jack turned to Riza. "I need a list of everyone who knew about your mission. If we can cross-reference that with the attack's timing and location, we might find who tipped them off." Riza stepped forward, her sharp eyes fixed on the screen. It was a small circle, just a handful of commanders. "They're all highly trusted until proven otherwise," Jack replied, leaning back. "Sometimes the person you trust the most is the one selling you out." Riza hesitated before nodding. "There was one officer, Commander Klin. He was the last person I reported to before we left. He insisted on handling the final preparations himself. At the time, I didn't think twice about it, but—" Jack tilted his head. "And you haven't heard from him since?" "No," she said slowly. "If he's the mole, he would have had the means and opportunity to leak our position." Jack's fingers danced over the console, pulling up communication logs. Let's see if his signal patterns matched the attack window. He filtered through the data, narrowing it down to the hours before the ambush. Finally, a faint trace appeared. A signal sent just before the HFY ship's location was compromised. "Bingo," Jack muttered. "Klin sent a burst transmission just before you were attacked. The coordinates match your ambush site. He gave you up." Riza's expression darkened. "Klin." Jack nodded. "Looks like you found your mole. Now we just need to figure out where he is." A younger Xalvire soldier spoke up. If he's still in the fleet, we can't just confront him directly. He'll deny it, and we don't have solid proof. Then we don't confront him directly, Jack said. We bait him. Make him think you have the package, something he can't resist going after. If he tries to contact whoever's pulling his strings, we'll have all the proof we need. Riza crossed her arms, considering the plan. It's risky. If he suspects a trap, that's why we don't give him time to think it through, Jack said. We set the trap, wait for him to make his move, and then we strike. After a moment, Riza nodded. Do it. Let's end this. Jack got to work, sending out a false signal that hinted they still had the package. If Clint was watching, it wouldn't take long for him to bite. As Jack finished typing in the last command, he felt a familiar sense of anticipation. The game was in motion, and soon they'd know if their hunch was right. The Valkyrie remained hidden in the shadow of the moon, its engines running quiet as Jack and Riza finalized the details of their plan. The crew was nervous, exchanging wary glances as the tension grew. Jack didn't need to say it aloud. This was their best shot at catching Clint in the act, but it was also dangerous. We're broadcasting the fake signal now, Jack said, his fingers hovering over the console. It'll look like you still have the package, just enough to tempt him into making contact with his backers. Riza stood behind him, arms crossed tightly over her chest. And when he does, we'll have a trace on the transmission. Once we know who he's dealing with, we can finally shut this down. Jack glanced back at her. That's the idea. If he takes the bait, we'll have the proof we need to expose him to your command. After that, it's up to you how you deal with him. Riza's expression hardened. He won't get away with this. If Clint betrayed us, he'll answer for his actions. The plan went into motion. The Valkyrie systems emitted a carefully crafted signal, mimicking the frequency and encryption codes that the package would have used. It was subtle, designed to look like a momentary mistake, as if Riza's ship had lost its encryption after the initial ambush. To anyone paying attention, especially someone looking for that signal, it would seem like the package was still out there. Hours passed. The crew waited in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Jack monitored the console, watching for any sign that Clint had taken the bait. The steady hum of the ship's systems was the only sound as the minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. Then, a soft beep. Jack's eyes flicked to the screen. A transmission had just been sent from Clint's known coordinates. We've got him, Jack said quietly. He's making contact. Riza moved closer, her gaze locked on the screen. Where's it going? Jack tapped a few keys, routing the data through the Valkyrie systems. The transmission wasn't sent directly to the Xalvire fleet. Instead, it went to a known black market comms relay, one commonly used by mercenaries and raiders. Clint's working with outsiders, Jack confirmed. Probably hired them to stage the ambush. Riza's jaw tightened. He's a traitor. There's no doubt now. Jack nodded. We've got the trace. Now it's up to you. Do we go after him, or do you take this evidence to your command? Riza didn't hesitate. We go after him. I want him to see us coming. No more hiding. Jack's fingers flew across the console, plotting a course toward Clint's location. The time for subtlety was over. They were about to confront the traitor head-on. The Valkyrie dropped out of warp near the edge of a cold, barren asteroid belt. Jack guided the ship carefully through the field, using the massive rocks as cover. Ahead, a single cruiser hung in the void. Commander Clint's ship. Riza stood at the viewport, her arms crossed, watching the traitor's vessel come into view. Clint's in there, she said, her voice low but firm. He won't expect us to come straight for him. Jack checked the scanners. He's got a few smaller ships on patrol, but nothing the Valkyrie can't handle. If we move fast, we'll catch him before he can call for reinforcements. Riza nodded, gripping the back of his chair. No hesitation. Let's end this. Jack pushed the Valkyrie's engines forward. skimming the edge of the asteroid field. The smaller patrol ships spotted them immediately, and alarms flared on Clin's cruiser. A pair of interceptors broke off from the main vessel, heading straight for the Valkyrie. "Hang on," Jack called out. "This might get rough." The Valkyrie surged forward, weaving through the asteroids as the interceptors opened fire. Jack's hands flew over the controls, rolling and banking the ship to avoid the laser blasts. He fired back, taking out one of the enemy ships with a quick, precise shot. The second interceptor tried to outflank him, but Jack outmaneuvered it, his years of combat experience paying off. Another burst of fire, and the second interceptor exploded in a flash of light. "Patrol's down," Jack said, his voice steady. "We're going straight for Clin." The Valkyrie closed the distance to the cruiser, dodging more defensive fire. Jack spun the ship to avoid a missile, then dove under the cruiser's main guns. With one final burst from the engines, he brought the Valkyrie into position. "We're locked on," Jack announced. "Ryza, it's your call." Ryza's eyes burned with determination. "Let's board." The docking maneuver was quick and clean. The Valkyrie latched onto the side of Clin's cruiser, and the hatch opened to reveal the dark, metallic corridors of the enemy ship. Ryza and her crew stormed in, their weapons at the ready. Jack followed, covering their advance. Inside, the crew encountered light resistance, guards who clearly weren't prepared for a direct assault. Ryza's team moved with precision, neutralizing the defenders one by one. They made their way to the command center, where Clin was waiting. The traitor stood at the far end of the room, his weapon drawn. He looked shocked at first, but then his expression hardened. "Ryza, you survived. Your mistake was thinking we wouldn't fight back," she said coldly. Clin tried to raise his weapon, but Ryza was faster. With a single, precise shot, she disarmed him. Her crew quickly restrained him, leaving him powerless. "It's over," Ryza said, her voice steady. "You'll answer for what you've done." Jack watched quietly, knowing this was her moment. She had fought to save her people, to uncover the truth, and now she had won. As they returned to the Valkyrie, Jack glanced at Ryza. "So what's next?" She looked at him with a small, tired smile. "We go home, and we make sure this never happens again." Jack nodded. For now, the battle was over. But he knew their story was only just beginning.